Hey, my name is Chelsea Fagan, and I'm the founder and CEO of The Financial Diet, a totally independently owned and operated company of women who love to talk about money. Welcome to The Financial Confessions, a weekly show where we talk to people about their personal finances, their professional industry, and how money shapes their lives. You can listen to or watch new episodes of The Financial Confessions every week on YouTube or your preferred streaming platform. You can also support TFD and get exclusive access to our entire catalog of ad-free bonus videos, workshops, Discord community, our book club, and more by joining our members-only community on Patreon or YouTube. Our 2024 goal is to be primarily supported by our incredible community, and joining our membership program is the best way to do that. Enjoy the episode. Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode. One thing that I have been asked to cover over and over again here on TFD, and something that I can't really speak to very well personally as someone who doesn't have a four-year degree, is the extraordinary debt that a lot of young Americans especially find themselves in for degrees that they were basically told by everyone in their lives and everyone in our culture was essentially the only way for them to live a good life. As a lot of you might know, I went to a community college and never ended up finishing my degree, so I've simply lived my life without really the student debt that many people's young adult finances are essentially defined by. For some people, taking on sometimes six figures and upwards of student debt proves to be worth it on the other end in terms of their earning potential. But for a lot of Americans, it's wholly unnecessary and sometimes even contradicts their ability to be nimble in the job market. I work in media, for example, and the number of people I know in this industry who have full-on master's degrees in creative pursuits that never even get looked at by hiring managers, let alone really contribute to their job performance, but yet are completely burdened with the debt of that degree. If I had to name them all, I couldn't possibly. It's just so common. And that's not even addressing the people who went to a year or two of law school and then decided they didn't want to be a lawyer and are left unable to practice law, but also having to pay for the privilege of having studied it. The life-changing burden that debt from especially some of these more predatory for-profit and private institutions can represent for people isn't just a financial one. It is extremely emotional, psychological, and can have a huge impact on our mental health. In putting out the call that we wanted to speak to real people this year who are dealing with really relatable and tangible financial issues, my guest today reached out to me because in many ways what we've discussed here fits her situation to a T. She found herself in six figures of student debt from a degree from one of those aforementioned private schools. And although she does earn a good living now, it is very arguable that not only was that level of expense for her education not necessary, in many ways, even the lessons around getting that degree that she received growing up proved to not be that applicable or useful when it came to navigating the real world of money. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome my guest today, Janet Cervantes.
Hello.
Hi, Janet. So to get started in our conversation, I'd love to just set the scene for our audience, tell them about your background, how you kind of found yourself in the college program you did, what college program you went to, and what it meant for you in terms of debt on the other side.
I am a first gen Mexican American. I'm the oldest in my family. And so I had no one really to walk me through what college I was supposed to go to or anything. I just had my parents say, you got to go to a good college, you got to get good grades. Um, so basically, I went to my local community college and I wasn't sure how I was gonna pay for it, so, I always remember having my parents say, like, "Well, if you apply for financial aid, they'll give you money." So I was like, "Great." I went to my financial aid office and I signed up for all of these loans that the financial aid people never said anything like, "Oh, you have to pay these back." So right off the bat, I started signing up for loans because it was free money, right? Um so that's what I did. I was in community college for about 4 years until I finally found this private university in Southern California that does undergraduate nursing degrees. And the boyfriend I had at the time, he signed up for it a year before I did. And I guess I didn't want to sign up with him because I wasn't sure if it was going to actually be a legitimate program. a lot of private universities are defunct now. So I was a little afraid of that happening, but then I did a lot of research on it, and it turns out that it was accredited and approved, and a lot of the graduates do have jobs in the medical field. So I signed up, and my tuition was initially $90,000. But when I graduated, my debt amount was maybe like $105,000. Currently, it's about $120,000. So, yeah, that's basically my school story.
Just for an undergraduate degree in nursing. You know, one thing you mentioned, so you're a first generation Mexican American. You're the oldest of your family, oldest girl, no less.
Yeah.
And, as a result, I think, as I mentioned in the intro, I think so many young people in this country receive really specific messaging around what college means, the role that it plays in your life, kind of a little bit of fear mongering about what life would look like without a college degree. But I can only imagine that being the eldest in a first generation family where, for example, your parents maybe did not grow up with a huge understanding of the private university system here. Can you talk about how, being in your specific position influenced the kinds of messages you were getting about college?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to start, my parents only made it to the sixth grade in Mexico. Um, my mom, she grew up with a father who was very, I don't know what the word is in English, but the word in Spanish is machista, a very patriarchal type of mentality. She wasn't allowed to go past the sixth grade because women don't need to be educated. And that was just basically, she wanted to go to school, but she didn't have that opportunity. And then my father also didn't go past the sixth grade because he was also the oldest of his family, and he needed to help financially support. So when they came here to this country, my mom was already pregnant with me, and my dad's and my mom's hope was that, I would get the education that they didn't get to get, like, as when they were young. Um, so they would always tell me, you have to go to college, you have to go to college, you have to work hard, you have to go to college and get a degree, or else you don't want to be working hard like we do, so that you can make a good living, so that you could, just basically have everything that we didn't get to have. So the pressure to go to a college, to a good college by that, which I didn't even know what a good college even meant, was enormous. I can't even tell you. I always felt so pressured to make sure that I knew what I wanted to do right out of high school so that I can go to college, not waste any time, and not disappoint my parents.
And, was there a sense when you were receiving all of that kind of messaging about college of like, and here are the degrees that you should get, or here are the things that you should study, or did you kind of choose healthcare on your own?
No, I don't really think they ever really geared me towards a specific career. But, when I was 17, I was a senior in high school, and I still didn't really know what I wanted to do, so the pressure was on for sure. But, at that time, my younger sister, who is 11 years younger than me, she was actually hospitalized at a hospital in Los Angeles that specializes in pediatrics. So the whole week that she was there, I spent a lot of time there. And so that kind of inspired me to be a nurse. And so when I went to nursing school, I always wanted to be a nurse for pediatrics. And that's exactly what I ended up doing.
As a result of, having gone into all this debt for an education where, as I mentioned, it probably wasn't totally necessary, like, especially for nursing, like, there are alternative ways to get, your nursing qualifications for a lot less money. Have you started, or have you already spoken to your younger siblings about kind of what you learned in this process?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, admittedly, I was not the, you know, straight A student in high school. So, my grades didn't really allow for me to apply to a four-year university straight, like right off the bat. So I had to go to community college and then hope to transfer to a four-year university. But I don't know how it is in other states, but at least here in California, the wait list for nursing programs are so ridiculous, and they also go off by lottery systems. So you never really know if you're going to get in. But for like, my younger brother and my younger sister, I really encourage them to take, college classes in high school so that a lot of their gen ed prerequisites would be completed by the time that they got to college. But I also just said, go to community college. You don't have to go to a private university because you're going to get into so much debt. And so luckily, neither of them went to a private college or a private university. Both of them went to public universities, and both of them combined don't even have half of the debt that I have.
Ugh. Well, speaking of the debt, so you mentioned that you graduated with about 105,000, and then now, how many years later is it at 120?
8 years later.
8 years later. So I assume that probably means you're paying, the minimum or a small amount. How much are you paying each month compared to the minimums?
Okay, well, prior to all the pandemic pauses, I was paying about $700 a month. And so now, I did continue to pay my private loan throughout the pandemic. That there was like no pause for private loans. Excuse me. So for all the other two loans I have that are federal, they're still in forbearance. So I plan to pay in March for them, like start paying in March. But yeah, I haven't started paying all of them. So right now I only pay about $150.
Okay, so you have a mix of federally subsidized and private loans, and part of the reason that the number has remained, well, has increased, is because you haven't been actively paying down any of the federally subsidized loans for the past several years. Is that right?
Right. So what ended up happening during the pandemic pause, is that um no interest was accruing on those loans, luckily. And if you wanted to pay them down, you could. And some of them I did, but for like a couple of months that I could actually afford it first of all. So I didn't really bring down my balance all that much. And then the private one, yeah, I had to continue to pay it. I had no other choice. That's the only loan that I've been able to bring down the balance on. I mean, it was 20,000, and now I think I owe like $16,000.
Okay, got it. And that's in paying $700 a month for many years.
Oh yeah, for many years. But I'm also, remember that in 2020, that's when the pause went into effect. So that
Right.
was 4 years ago. So in reality, I've been paying $700 for about 4 years.
Now, have you actually sat down and done the math of how much you would have to pay and for how long you would have to pay across all of your debts to eliminate them?
Oh, I don't think I've actually sat down to do that. I actually have a financial advisor through the financial gym. So yeah, so we haven't actually talked about how much I would have to pay down. Her philosophy, my advisor, her philosophy is just, do the minimum, because you don't want to spend your entire paycheck on trying to pay it down if you want to get it out of the way as fast as possible.
Got it. Um, yeah, and we should say, just as a disclaimer here, that everyone has a totally different strategy when it comes to debt repayment. So your mileage may definitely vary. Have you been able to make other big financial moves while carrying this debt? Like, for example, purchasing a home?
No. No, I haven't been able. Well, okay, I did purchase a car in 2020. Prior to that, I had the same car I had since high school for years and years and years. But that's probably the biggest purchase I've made since becoming a nurse and with all of this debt that I have. But the prospects of me buying a home right now are basically none. Um, yeah, and I mean, I made a move from Southern California to the Bay Area. That was really expensive. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it.
And, in terms of kind of the mental, psychological aspects of it, as you mentioned, um, you haven't really kind of even mapped out what it would look like to be debt free. Do you feel that at this point, your kind of perspective is just sort of existing within the debt and your focus is not to pay it off or to become debt free at any point?
Well, it was at some point. Last year, I was just at this point where I really don't want to just exist within the debt. I really do just want to pay it off. I have a daughter, and I want to give her the ability to remember like her childhood with parents that weren't always concerned about money. Um, So I made the jump to travel nursing. So travel nursing, it's a little bit more lucrative than say staff nursing. So I've been able to, since I started that in September of last year, I've been able to like aggressively pay down credit card debt, which is what like the plan that my advisor and I, Joy, came up with. We're gonna pay down all my credit card debt, beef up my emergency fund, and then truly start paying down like my private loan first, and then start to tackle all the federal loans. So that's what I'm doing now, because before, yeah, like you said, I was just kind of existing with this student loan debt with like no real end in sight, you know? And I was just getting really tired of it. And a lot of that mentality changed as soon as I had a daughter.
I should note for the audience that we had a recent episode with our guest Ryan Parrish that's all about, or a lot about, the finances of nursing, and she specifically goes into, staff versus travel nursing. She also talks a lot about. She recommends anyone who wants to get into nursing move to California specifically because the money's a lot better in California than other states, and the union's a lot stronger. Well, that's good that you've been able to get a lot more aggressive about it. On that note, though, so you mentioned you have credit card debt as well. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you got into credit card debt and where you're currently at with it?
Um, yeah, honestly, I just have to be completely transparent that, I don't always have like a hold on my purchases. Um, I got into a lot of credit card debt at first just through buying bullshit. I mean, that's as real as I can get. Um, I think my husband and I bought a $4,000 sectional during the pandemic, I know. And yeah, we put that on the credit card, which we paid off, you know. But I think a lot of it has also been like travel expenses and just like other really minor things, but it's not a whole lot. It's probably like $3,000 of credit card debt. Like, again, if I'm being completely transparent, I realize that other people have higher balances, and that's also because I've been aggressively paying it down.
I just want to take a second here to thank today's video sponsor, Delete Me. As someone who is very present on the internet and has been for basically my entire adult life, I know how important it is to protect certain information and how to use the internet wisely. As you know, all season long here on TFC, we've been chatting with relatable guests who have dealt with or are currently going through a wide range of personal and financial issues. While many of these hardships could never have been avoided due to circumstance, it's important to always remember to do what you can to protect yourself in situations that you do have control over. This is why I personally recommend and actually use Delete Me. I've been using Delete Me for months now, and they've provided me with detailed reports of all the places that my information, my personal, private information, has been showing up without my knowledge or consent all over the internet. Delete Me is a subscription service that removes your personal info from the largest people search databases on the web, and in the process helps prevent potential ID theft, doxing, and phishing scams. Delete Me finds and removes the personal information you don't want online and makes sure that it stays off. Sign up and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. Delete Me sends you regular personalized privacy reports showing what info they found, where they found it, and what they removed. Delete Me isn't just a one-time service. They're always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want on the internet. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me, now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/TFC and use promo code TFC at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/TFC and enter code TFC at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/TFC, code TFC. I must gasp at the sectional cost. I'm always so blown away by because you can't really fit big furniture in a small apartment, and so I'm always like, when I see people who live in larger homes who get these big pieces of furniture, it reminds me, oh yeah, like big pieces of furniture cost a lot of money. Well, on that note, I mean, maybe I think everyone's situation is different, but something I've always kind of thought about, because I was also in credit card debt at a certain time, and that's kind of what inspired me to start TFD initially, was my relationship to spending and consumer debt. And, I did have a few very small loans for community college, but luckily, again, they just never spiraled to much because I just didn't go to school for very long, and it wasn't expensive at all. It was mostly, honestly, just money I took out to live in an apartment, or not have to worry about lunch and stuff. It wasn't even really tuition. But I often think, even while not having had the more typical loan experience, when you look at the numbers on average, and especially numbers like yours, I do still think that the way that we were all taught, and especially I graduated high school pre-2008 crash, the way that we were all taught about taking out debt, period, and living with debt as it pertained to college, I think for me at least translated really subconsciously into how I thought about living in debt for, like you said, buying stuff I couldn't afford on a credit card, because I think the concept of just having a lot of debt was already really normalized in our culture, but also B, there wasn't, like you said, when you were first signing on to those loans, there was this feeling like you never even really thought about what it would mean to pay it off. It didn't feel like a real agreement. And I'm wondering, do you personally, looking back, feel like you see a connection between your journey with getting into so much student debt and then subsequently getting into credit card debt?
Yeah, I mean, I know growing up, I don't really remember times that I sat down with my parents to talk about finances, or this is how you do it. I know my dad, my very first bank account that I got like a little credit card with a $300 balance on it, and he told me how to balance my checkbook. I remember that really specifically. And he just said, just make sure you pay your credit card by the end of the month. But other than that, I didn't really have great education in finance. And so I never really made the conscious connection, oh my gosh, I really should not be spending this money as crazy as I was, because I'm gonna have to pay it back and there's interest. And I didn't even know what interest was. I had absolutely zero concept of it. So I think a little bit of that translated over to my consumer spending as well, because it was just money that was sitting there. And it's like, well, it's there, why not spend it? So that really was my mentality. And it's honestly a really terrible mentality, but I just didn't know any better. And also, I just wanna say I don't live in a house, I live in an apartment, so that sectional is quite small for the apartment that I live in, actually, but yeah, again, why did I buy a $4,000 sectional? Couldn't tell you.
Well, I mean, we're working right now on our February video essay, which is it's about a lot of stuff, but we talk a lot about the buy now, pay later programs like Klarna and Afterpay and stuff. And like it really has changed. I mean, between that and just the ability to online shop, period, like it has completely changed people's relationships to what it means to even be able to afford something. Like at this point, you can basically finance literally everything. And in the case of furniture, furniture and appliances were often financed kind of always to an extent. That's not that new. But, people are financing like a shirt from Banana Republic. People are financing like almost literally anything you could think of to purchase. And I do wonder, you know, uh, from your perspective, like knowing we have obviously so many people in this country who are saying like I'm in all this debt for my education. It did not, like, I didn't need to be, I could have done it another way. Like, this is really negatively affecting my life, my mental health, all that stuff. And yet, we're not really seeing the numbers change. Like, young people are still doing it. Teenagers are still kind of signing on to it. And in some ways, like, especially with the rise of the buy now, pay later stuff, like, you see the youngest generations having an even more kind of loose relationship with debt. I'm wondering from your perspective as someone who does have, younger siblings and is kind of close to that situation, if you have a view on like why this continues to be so common.
Well, I guess speaking personally, I think it's I think it's a little bit of like avoidance. I think a lot of us, our coping mechanism with, the realities of being so heavily in debt, is that we just avoid it altogether. Money is a little bit of a taboo subject. I think culturally, I'm Mexican, and so like I don't really remember having conversations, like open conversations about money and being in debt growing up. And even now, it's not really something that is talked about. It's something that is like private. And most of the time it's handled by the man. So, you know, it's not it's not something that's openly talked about. So when I've tried to have conversations with my brother and my sister, for example, about debt, like, at least I know, like, I see some of those avoidant behaviors and, like, one or the other of my siblings, and they're not always very willing to talk about it because it's just, like, not something that we grew up with. It's just, like, not a learned behavior or habit, I guess, to s to just talk about money freely.
In terms of your kind of motivation, because obviously, like you said, you've shifted from a mentality of, I'm just going to be in really high debt forever to no, I would actually like to be debt free one day and I'm working on getting there. And obviously, you made a big shift in terms of your career, which has really increased your earning potential and all of that. But in terms of the day to day mental health, especially as someone who is, who does like to spend and who's had problems with that in the past, how do you stay motivated and positive about making the quote unquote good decision every single day, even when it's not very fun?
Well, honestly, this is gonna sound so cheesy, but the main thing that motivates me is my family, my husband and of course my daughter. Like I said, when she was born, like um a lot of the mentality that I had around debt and spending and the way that I was living changed, obviously, because I want better for her. I remember being a child, and even though like money wasn't discussed, it was still like, for me, I knew that money was like a constant presence. Like, we couldn't do certain things because of money. We couldn't do certain, like, we couldn't buy certain things because of money. So I want her to basically know that money is present in her life and how to have a healthy relationship with it. So that's what really motivated me. Just having my baby, basically. It sounds really cheesy, but I just want better for her. I want her to have a healthier relationship with money than the relationship that I'm still currently navigating with money. I'm not at a point where I can be or I can confidently say that, oh yeah, I know exactly what I'm doing with my money, or I have a great relationship with my money, or I'm 100% financially literate, because I'm not. But I just want her to be more confident. And then also, I guess I I want a better life. I just want a better life. The better life, I guess, that my parents imagined for me when they first immigrated here to this country, because sometimes I feel like I'm not, I haven't reached that, better life that they wanted for me. And it's really discouraging, and it's a really big mental battle because, I'm 33 years old. I don't own a home. Um, I don't think I will own a home anytime soon, at least not in like the next 10 years, at least here in California too, with all the debt that I have. By the time that my dad was my age, he had already owned a home, several cars. He had moved around a lot. He had at least two kids, and it was just a very different life. So sometimes I find myself comparing where I am in life now to where my dad was at my age, and my mom. So it's like a constant mental battle, and it's really it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I go to therapy currently, because of all the, you know, all the mental struggles that I've had with this financial situation that I find myself in. Student loan really is really it's crippling. It's crippling.
You mentioned wanting to give your daughter, and I don't think that's cheesy at all, by the way, wanting to give her a much healthier view and relationship with money than the one you grew up with, and that, money was often a struggle for you growing up. Something that's really common for, people who grew up low income or first gen or what have you, is finding themselves with the kind of dual responsibility of caring for their own families and helping with their parents, grandparents, etc., previous generations. Is that something that you have had to deal with?
Yeah. So my mom's parents, she isn't the oldest, but she had like a really big part in taking care of her parents before they passed away. And so they lived with us when I was growing up. And so I was very much part of that care that she provided for them. So it was like a really significant time for me, because it kind of gave me a look into what life might be like, eventually. Like a very real topic that a lot of us, I'm sure it's not just, Mexican, but I'm sure across many, many cultures, a lot of us first gen daughters, we basically have to prepare to take care of our parents when they're much older and unable to take care of themselves. So it's it's something that I know is going to happen, and I know that, it's not even a possibility, it's a for sure thing that's going to happen. At least in our culture, it's really looked down upon to put your parents in like a nursing home. Especially for me, that I have done like clinical rotations in nursing homes. I don't think I could actually do that to my parents. So I know I would be taking on like financial responsibility of like either my mom, maybe my dad, once they're unable to do that for themselves. And it's just part of life, I guess. And I I don't want my daughter to feel like she needs to do that for me. So part of this journey that I'm on right now to pay down my debt aggressively is because I also want to continue to save aggressively for retirement, so that she doesn't feel like she has to financially provide for me when I'm old and unable to provide for myself.
Can you say more about how working in nursing care made you feel that you would not want to put a loved one in a nursing care?
And it's not so much the care that's given to the patient, it's just the fact that they're lonely, you know? Um, I know there's lots of articles out there about like elder loneliness and like depression, and it's just something that I wouldn't really want to see my parents go through. They're usually, in a room by themselves all day, bedridden. Sometimes they go outside. Um, they're fed these really generic meals, and it's just a really lonely and dull, like, way to live, especially at the end of your life. And even though it's really, really hard work for my mom, for me, and my dad to have to take care of my mom's parents at the end of their life, they lived a very full end of life. Like, they had a very, very rich end of life. And that's the same way that I would want my parents to have, like, the final part of their life full and surrounded by family.
The loneliness thing is very real. I talked about this on social media a while ago, but as someone who doesn't want children, a very, very common thing that you'll hear is, well, you'll be alone when you get older. No one's going to be with you. And what I always say to that is, I don't think people realize how many people who do have children are still alone when they get older. How common it is. I forget the exact stat, but I think it's the majority of nursing home residents have between 0 and 1 visitors in a given year, something of that nature. We can find the stat in post production. But suffice to say, there is a huge problem with just kind of, abandoning elder generations, including by their own children. Um, you know, in terms of advice that you would give, whether for someone who's looking to go into nursing specifically or someone who, is just very concerned that a really expensive degree is kind of their only way to make a good living, what advice would you give them while they're navigating that choice?
I would say to research every possible option, and talk to people in whether they're in your life or not. Reach out to other nurses, join Facebook groups for, nurses currently in college. Talk to your cousins. If people have cousins that are in college and have been through the experience, talk to them about, what the financial aspect is. There's a lot of ways to get your nursing degree aside from going to a private college. You could go to a four-year university straight out of high school and you'll save a lot of money like that. Or, you could go to community college and get your associates, work for example here or here in California, in Southern California, you could go get your associate's degree, work for a county hospital, and they'll pay for your bachelor's if you work for them for 2 years. Um, so, there's a lot of options. Private university was my last resort. And I say that because I had no idea what I was doing. And so I felt like I was running out of options. But also know that, you're always going to have a lot of options. You're never going to run out of options. Don't have this like all or nothing mentality.
And for someone who is in a huge amount of debt right now and is kind of in the position that you were in prior, where it's just like, I'll always have this debt. I'm not even going to think about paying it off. I can't even imagine what that looks like. And just kind of can't get their head around the idea of actively working to pay it off. What would you say to them?
You have options. You're not alone. There's a lot of us out there that are neck deep in debt. And I mean, I got a financial advisor because I really wanted to get smart with money, or at least learn to navigate it. And if it's something that's within your like financial bandwidth, if you can fit that into your budget, maybe look into getting like a financial advisor with, and not with like a investment firm, old white guys telling you what to do with your money, but someone who is relatable. I really like the company that I'm with. They're great. They're all women and I love them. I've been with Joy since 2017, and she's really, really helped me. So I guess also you could try to find a community of people that are willing to help each other out. Just by talking about money, I really hope that me being on this podcast is going to encourage a lot of women in my life to open up about money, and so that we can have like a little community, because it's not something that's very common. I don't really talk about money with my friends that often. It's just like not something that I do, again, because I didn't grow up doing that. But, you know, get comfortable with talking about money so that you don't feel like you're alone and that you're drowning in this type of debt.
Well, on that note for my last question, I mean, you know, specifically for a lot of people, part of what keeps them quiet is having shame, not just for what they, the decisions that they made or the amount of debt they're in, but also, as you mentioned, there are a lot of financial milestones that are basically impossible to hit when you're carrying a lot of debt. So you can start to feel very behind. As someone who has kind of dealt with a lot of those complicated feelings, for someone who feels very ashamed of their financial situation, what would you say to them?
Oh, that's a tough question. um Shame is really difficult to shake. Um, Especially speaking personally, I'm, as the oldest daughter, of Mexican immigrants, it's a really difficult feeling to shake. Especially when you see, other financially well off family members succeeding, um, and they're significantly younger than you. So it's a really difficult feeling to shake, but at the end of the day, I know that I make my parents proud with little things that they tell me. They're obviously really proud of me for being on my own. They haven't had to worry about me for well over a decade at this point, as far as like financially having to support me. So, you know, find the little things in life that you could really be proud of. Even if, hey, you know what? I've been paying for my car on my own for a year. I think, that's a really big accomplishment. Um, if you were able, like little victories, try to find the happiness in that. Shame, like I said, it's really difficult to shake, but also if you need a little bit of extra help, seek therapy. Therapy has been really helpful for me, and I'm sure it has been for other people too. But um, seek therapy, and you're not alone. I keep saying you're not alone, because a lot of us out there, a lot of us, like you said, real people are dealing with this debt issue. It's not something that you should be ashamed of or feel alone in this journey.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And, to anyone out there, like she said, who is dealing with a similar situation, and I know that is a lot of you, please, I want to reiterate, do not feel ashamed. The entire reason I started TFD was because I was in extreme shame over my financial situation, which was less debt, but perhaps more severe collections, arrests, all that kind of stuff, rock bottom credit score. So, it's very true that there are a lot of us out there dealing with these problems at any given time. Thank you so, so much, Janet, for joining us. And thank you all at home for tuning in. And we will see you back here next Monday on an all new episode of the Financial Confessions. Bye. Thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to tune in next week for an all-new episode of The Financial Confessions. The Financial Confessions is created by The Financial Diet and hosted by me, Chelsea Fagan. It is produced by Alexa Brooks-Major and Holly Trantham. Recording and editing by Emily Fisher, and music and sound effects are from Epidemic Sound. Want more of our content? Head over to our YouTube page, The Financial Diet, to see our monthly deep dives, videos of this show, and our entire backlog of videos and podcasts. I'll talk to you next week.